Hello everyone and welcome to the Vortex, where lies and falsehoods are trapped and exposed. I'm Michael Voris. When a train wreck happens, the entire train, every car one after the other, doesn't careen off the tracks all at the same moment. First the engine comes off, then the next car, and so forth. In an especially long train, the cars near the back may not even be aware that the engine has come off the tracks. Maybe a sudden shiver or shake signaling something, but that the passengers are about to die, not so much, not at first. But eventually, the entire train is derailed and no one escapes. And no one can put the train back on the track and then just resume with the journey. The ride is over. This is an apt way to understand what has happened to the church. It's a train wreck, just in slow motion. The engine careened off the tracks owing to modernism, and for the past century plus, one car after another has come off the tracks and crashed into the bottom of the giant gorge. What we're witnessing now in the church are the few remaining cars beginning to come off the track until the entire train has been derailed. And of course, don't forget, the conductors and the engineers, the bishops, are right there telling the passengers everything is fine, despite the impending doom awaiting them. The church has been so severely betrayed by peddlers of heresies and dissent disguised as scholars and theologians that there are few places to turn for clarity. When the poison of Marxism was brought into the church a century ago, the weapon of choice by modernism, it was really lights out then, just a slow process. These damnable heresies and practices were allowed to fester. The heresies came from modernism, and permission was granted by the Marxists. But the Marxists had an ally that hadn't necessarily counted on, that they hadn't necessarily figured into the equation: the apathy and indifference of so many Catholic laymen. Not at the very beginning, but these forces of darkness are relentless. They never back down. Never. They just keep coming at you. In the meantime, Catholics, even ones who count themselves as faithful, traditional, or whatever, refuse to jump into the fight, or are bored by the whole affair and lock themselves away in their little sanctuaries, allowing the Marxists in their church free access. The current hierarchy, like the crop of leaders before them, is a disgrace. They can't even manage the sacraments correctly. Word has now emerged that a second priest, this one in Oklahoma, was watching his baptism video and found out that he had not been validly baptized either. So, of course, his priesthood had not been validly administered because, in short, he wasn't Catholic. His case mirrors the case of Father Matthew Hood here in the Archdiocese of Detroit, which became public a couple of weeks ago. He too had not been a priest because he too was not Catholic when he was non-ordained. Both men, for the record, have been regularized properly, but that's not the point. Besides their cases, Church Militant has become aware of other cases of video-proof baptisms showing they were not valid. The individuals do not want to have their identities revealed, but it's right there on their home videos. And more, here in the Archdiocese of Detroit, a Father Jerry Brzezinski was baptizing in the name of the Creator, the Redeemer, and the Sanctifier. That whole mess had to be quietly cleaned up for Detroit Cardinal Adam Maida, an empty alb if there ever was one, by then Father Jeffrey Monforton, who is now the Bishop of Steubenville, Ohio. That there was anything to be cleaned up at all, see, that's the story. Frankly, these are not a few isolated situations. They are multiplied, nor are they 40 years ago. Look at the video given to Church Militant of a confirmation done in St. Catherine's Parish in Oak Lawn in the Archdiocese of Chicago by Father Dennis Ziamek, using a Q-tip to apply the sacred oil. And no, we aren't kidding. We consulted with a top-flight theologian and canonist and asked if this is valid. Here was the three-word response we got back: invalid, invalid, invalid. And yes, it was all in caps. A Q-tip confirmation. You can't make this stuff up. All over America, priests are cheering for sodomy. saying nothing about children being hacked to pieces, are actually gay themselves, are stealing from their congregations, lying about the faith, deceiving when they aren't actively lying, and in all of this, they are following the lead of those hireling shepherds of theirs. Joe Biden has been given a complete pass by U.S. bishops, despite his heresies and his sacrilege that the whole world knows about. He not only embraces sodomy as marriage, he actually performs homosexual marriage. And yet, on even that single item, absolute stone silence from the mitred class, the silence of the tomb from these frauds. Move on to child murder, and again, the bishops say nothing. Not a blessed word about his moral crimes and outrages that have been going on for decades. They allow other twisted clerics like James Martin to carry their water for them, making it appear as though Trump and Biden's positions are, kind of morally equivalent, which they clearly are not. On child murder, Biden would not only sign the bill presented to him by his party of death to codify abortion, but he would make every American financially having to support it in their taxes. He would also sue the Little Sisters of the Poor. He has said this stuff in his campaign speeches. Again, over the contraception mandate, the Little Sisters of the Poor, because, attacking sweet religious ladies for 10 years in court is apparently nowhere near long enough, even though they finally won. To these wicked men and miters, profiting handsomely from their silence, killing millions of children and legitimizing so-called marriage, based on anal sex just doesn't disqualify a man from the presidency, or even differently, doesn't warrant excommunication. Sacrilegious Holy Communions don't move them. Nothing moves these stone cold-hearted monsters, nothing. They attack and squash priests calling out the evil of all this. Yet, they let the modernist Marxist radicals within their own jurisdictions destroy souls. If they go to hell when they die, they will deserve every bit of the eternal torment they will endure, and it will be the worst reserved by the demons, especially for the successors of the apostles. But they don't care because they don't believe anything. In fact, it would be a measure of justice that they would spend their eternity with Judas, who they have allowed all of us to think was somehow, beyond reason, saved. What if Joe Biden and his party supported Nazism? Would that disqualify him in their minds from either the church or the White House, or both? Would they then stay quiet? So giving them a benefit of the doubt, which at this point in church history they do not deserve, we should presume that if some candidate, especially a Catholic, got up and said, "I favor the genocide of millions," we would hope that the bishops would denounce that. So when there actually is an actual genocide and an actual candidate who is not an actual Catholic, who is actually supporting the actual genocide, wouldn't this specific situation warrant a mention, meaning actual condemnation from the bishops? In their worthless piece of garbage voting document they spew out every election called Faithful Citizenship, there is a very unethical and deceptive line. Quote, "The church's leaders avoid endorsing or opposing candidates." Closed quote. Now there's plenty wrong here. First, really? Seriously? If some candidate, especially a Catholic, got up and said, "All blacks should be executed," the bishops would seriously hide behind this line from their dumb document and say, "We can't oppose him." But what if he said, "All emasculated, feminine-appearing, overweight, thieving biological males in robes should have their heads chopped off in the town square"? Pretty sure they'd all be pretty vocal in calling for his disqualification. The other problem with this is that Cardinal Tobin of Newark came out earlier this week and essentially endorsed Biden.
Yes or no. I think that a person in good conscience could vote for Mr. Biden. I frankly, in my own way of thinking, have a more difficult time with the other option.
So which way is it, your lordships? Do you say nothing about any candidate whatsoever, no matter what monstrous evil he supports and forces on the country? Or do you just selectively endorse such a candidate because you're making loads of money from his party? This bishop deceptive doublespeak has got to end. Church Militant has been researching many of these men and has turned up that of the ones we are able to actually discover through public records and voting records and all of that, 27% are registered Democrats. 27%. And that's only the ones where a thorough search of records is able to be done because of state laws. Look, Catholics, here's the deal. Many of these men are frauds as bishops. Sure, they're validly consecrated, nobody's arguing that, but then again, since they can't seem to keep track of baptisms very well, maybe they aren't. But presuming they are fraudulent in every other way imaginable. They lie, cheat, steal, cover up sex abuse, and secretly promote and kiss up to evil politicians who line their pockets. We entitled this episode Train Wreck. Our apologies, by the way, to all decent, honest train wrecks. If our Lord doesn't do something about this wicked, cowardly lot, He's going to owe Judas an apology. God love you. I'm Michael Voris.